Hey everybody, it is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu. Greetings, Jill, on this National Pasta Day.
Moshe, greetings to you. I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. I don't think anyone says greetings, right? But I said it at the beginning of the podcast.
Greetings and salutations.
Greetings and salutations. Jill, on this National Pasta Day, it reminds me of last year's National Pasta Day when I asked you your favorite pasta, and you went with angel hair. Curious whether you have updated your favorite pasta or you're doubling down.
Well, I haven't thought much about it, except that I still have friends who have not let me live that down, who have told me that they think of me differently because angel hair is my favorite pasta. But I clarified that one of the reasons that angel hair is my favorite pasta is because there is more surface area for sauce and cheese and the stuff I really, really like in a pasta.
Despite how thin it is.
Yes. I mean, upon careful consideration and rethinking the choice, perhaps angel hair wasn't the best decision.
But you're sticking with it. I respect that. You haven't flip-flopped on your favorite pasta.
And Moshe, much more important news. You spent the morning on Wednesday talking to a group of 7th and 8th graders about the state of the media. So how did it go?
Jill, it was actually great. You know, typically I've spoken to college students about media literacy. I've spoken to high schoolers about media literacy. I hadn't yet done junior high students, but a very engaged group up in Yonkers at Patricia DeCharo School up there. Really compelling questions. You know, we talked to them a lot about how they're getting their news. And I literally did like a 300,000 year history of humanity and how we got our news in about 40 seconds. Explained for like our first 296,000 years. It was all word of mouth. Then you get written word. We go with that for a few thousand years. Then you get to the printing press. And I actually said, I was like, hey guys, what happened? What's the 15th century invention that led us to have like modern journalism and be able to, you know, circulate information more? And like hands went up and they're like printing press. And I was like, oh, you guys are on it. And then, you know, talked about the 20th century. And I was like, you know, literally it was your great-grandparents and grandparents that got radio, me seeing news on film, seeing news on TV, seeing news on the internet, social media, and how things have sped up. The point of it all really was to get at like how to detect bias, what questions to ask when you see sources online, especially since they are these social media natives. They're getting their information. They're searching for information already on TikTok, and questions to be asking about, you know, the various influencers, etc., that they follow. So really enjoyed the conversation, and I've already heard by posting it on Instagram. I think already as of this recording, Jill, I heard from 5 or 6 different schools across the country when I posted it saying, hey, we'd like you to do this for our school. So if you're interested in being part of the Mo News Media Literacy Tour, as we try to help the next generation of kids be adept news consumers, please reach out via our website. There's a page, book Mo News over at mo.news. Jill, my favorite question, though, I'm getting from social media is, can you do this for my parents? Forget the kids. You need to hit the grandparents who are spending all day on Facebook.
So I really want to get to today's news, but I am curious. I'm assuming most of them said that they get their news from TikTok.
Yes. So obviously the law is they have to be 13 or above. Some of them admitted to me that they have found a way around that at age 12. But it went TikTok 1, Snapchat 2, almost a tie there, and then Instagram 3. I did ask, hey, any of you guys on Facebook? And like one kid shot his hand up. I'm like, you're making that up. No way.
Well, hopefully we got some new Mo News listeners and Instagram followers, which will bring our demo down a little bit, which is always good.
Hey, we're all about informing everyone from birth to death here over on the Mo News Podcast.
Not to be too morbid. All right, let's get to the headlines, starting with presidential politics. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump both appear on Fox News separately. We've got the big headlines. And Jimmy Carter fulfills his 100th birthday wish as he votes by mail in the state of Georgia. Plus a deep dive, what is in our food, the protest outside of Kellogg's headquarters, and our interview with the scientists for a reality check.
Jill, it turns out people have opinions about this, like up there with like Israel, up there with the Israelis and the Palestinians, Donald Trump and vaccines. Like that's how my comments are running right now. They're running hot over on the Instagram account.
Overseas, tensions between North and South Korea are heating up. And China says that it will not take using force against Taiwan off the table. To the economy, some energy price predictions, why it could be some good news finally for consumers. Also, holiday shoppers plan to spend more this season, even as they are still paying for last year's holiday gifts. And Tom Brady, now part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, which means he officially is done playing professional football.
We think.
Plus, Moshe is on to stay in history.
Joe, get ready to feel old. A musician from the 90s is about to become a grandfather. I won't tell you who.
So I already feel old, so yeah. It's fine.
It's fine. Well, anyway, you might be surprised. We're about to hit a moment here in On This Day in History.
All right, let's start as we will on most days until Election Day with presidential politics. Both former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris were interviewed on Fox News. Let's start with Trump. He sat down with Fox News' Harris Faulkner for a town hall. He took questions from an all-female audience on everything from the economy to crime and abortion. One woman asked regarding abortion, why is the government involved in women's basic rights? Trump defending the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. He said for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. He says every legal scholar, the great ones, every lawyer, but the Democrats, the Republicans, the liberals, the conservatives, they wanted it brought out of the federal government and brought back to the states for a vote of the people. And he said, like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother.
Jill, we should note on that talking point that while there are a lot of constitutional scholars on the right who did have an issue with Roe v. Wade, a lot of Democrats take issue when Trump says that Democrats wanted Roe v. Wade to be overturned.
Yeah, and he also said that post-Dobbs, he thinks some states have passed abortion laws that are, quote, too tough. He also called himself the father of IVF. Trump has previously said that he wants IVF treatments to be covered by insurance. He has not said, though, how he plans to pay for that.
No, and there's a lot of Republicans in Congress that are not quite there with, I guess, the now self-described father of IVF. That was the first time he rolled that out. He also called the Republican Party the party of IVF, saying, quote on Fox, we want fertilization and it's all the way. And Democrats tried to attack us on it. We're out there on IVF, even more than Democrats. We're totally in favor. IVF, as you might recall, became a huge flashpoint, especially out of what happened out of Alabama earlier this year. That's when the Supreme Court in Alabama said that frozen embryos are children, and those who destroy them can be held liable for wrongful death. That effectively froze IVF in the state in response to a very restrictive Republican law. Republicans then moved in the state to change the law. And so it's led to this huge Republican backtrack on the issue, sensing Trump did, Republicans did, that this was not going to be good for them in the fall. Trump has tried to double down on IVF as a counter there, again, saying it should be fully taken care of by insurance. The government should pay for it potentially here. Again, he's running into trouble there with fellow Republicans running for Congress and who are currently sitting in Congress.
Another woman whose son attends the University of Georgia asked him about crime and public safety following the murder of nursing student Laken Riley by a migrant who's in the country illegally. That happened earlier this year. So take a listen to this exchange.
My son is a Georgia Bulldog. He was on campus the day Laken Riley was murdered. How quickly, in a sanctuary city like they're calling Athens, Georgia, how quickly can you remove those threats to our society?
We can do things in terms of moving people out. We can move them out of the sanctuary cities. We're going to end all sanctuary cities in the United States, and we're going to go back to normalcy, and we're going to have law and order.
Crime consistently ranks as a top issue for Republican voters across the country, right behind the economy.
Yeah, and Trump has promised the largest deportation in American history. He's promised to deport 14 million migrants here, estimated, who are not here legally. How that will actually go down, how expensive that'll be, whether it'll actually be able to happen, in doubt among the questions that we would confront in a potential second Trump administration. He also promised in that exchange there to end all sanctuary cities in the U.S. Just a reminder here, sanctuary cities generally refer to cities that decline to cooperate with federal detention requests related to undocumented migrants. So cities who say, I don't care what you say in the federal government, we're a safe place, we're a sanctuary city for migrants. Now, Trump tried to do this the first time he was in office. He signed an executive order cutting cities off from federal funding who do not cooperate with immigration authorities, but that was later struck down by the courts. So he says he's going to try it again. This time he says he's going to use a law from 1798 called the Aliens Act, and believes that he is in the right here constitutionally to be able to use this act from 240 or so years ago. From 230 or so years ago, that will clearly be objected to in the courts. So we'll see how the courts rule to see whether that 1798 rule will apply for him to be able to do this sort of take two attempt. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris was also out there on the campaign trail on Wednesday in the important swing state of Pennsylvania, and then she went to Wisconsin. She has, we've told you, been criticized for a lack of media interviews, but they've really adjusted in the past week and a half, doing a whole number of podcasts, late night shows. She did the interview with 60 Minutes. And then yesterday, she goes into the Lion's Den, Fox News channel, which you can imagine they haven't chosen to do because they feel good about their numbers, the Harris campaign. But nonetheless, they have done that, trying to appeal to folks who watch Fox News who might be independent and might still be open-minded here. It was a very combative, nearly 30-minute interview between Brett Baer there on Fox and Kamala Harris. The focus for nearly the first half was all things border, all things immigration, a hot issue they cover all the time over on Fox, an issue that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris have been under fire on, given the record number of migrants that have crossed the border over the last couple of years. Here's a taste of it. We posted about 9 minutes of the immigration section, the border section, over on the Mo News Instagram account. But here is about 2 minutes worth. It gives you a sense both of the tone, the back and forth, the interruptions, and really, this is a sense of how the entire interview went.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And
What's interesting, Jill, is when we asked folks for the reaction to this interview, Republicans said, oh my God, Harris did terribly. Democrats said, oh my God, she really gave it to them at Fox. So really, this was a Rorschach test, this interview, for how you feel about the election. Again, it's fascinating seeing the comments on the video clips that we've posted, because literally people are seeing the same clip, Some people are saying, oh my God, she was horrendous. Other people saying, oh my God, she was amazing, given the way that she was challenged there. So the question really is how much of an impact this interview has. Clearly, the clips will get circulated, will motivate Democrats potentially to donate to her, showing that she is taking challenging questions, going over to Fox News. At the same time, not sure how many people she won over. In particular, most of Fox viewers probably would tell you that they prefer Donald Trump. Certainly, there's independents there, Nikki Haley voters that are still unsure that she might have been trying to get in this interview. Unclear whether she won any folks over, but given how close things are in the battleground states, we've told you that every vote is going to matter here. A couple of those states could come down to 10,000 votes again, like they did in 2020. So clearly the effort here from Harris is to reach every potential voter, both the base voters, churning out black voters, liberal voters, progressives, women, etc., but also trying to win over some independents. One notable thing she did in the Fox interview is she was asked again, hey, is there anything you would do differently from Joe Biden? It's a question she got on Colbert last week. It's a question she got on The View last week. Both times she goes, I don't think I'd change anything. She did make a point. She changed her language slightly yesterday on Fox, saying, I asked the question again. She goes, my presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency, that she represents a new generation, will focus on things like housing and small business without really criticizing the existing administration. I also want to mention, Jill, sticking with politics here, former President Jimmy Carter, who turned 100 years old earlier this month, has now fulfilled his birthday wish. He wanted to live to 100 so he could vote again for Kamala Harris. And officials say that the 100-year-old former president did vote by mail yesterday in Georgia. His family said that this was a big deal for him. He is the longest living president of all time. Both George H.W. Bush and former President Gerald Ford made it into their mid-90s. Jimmy Carter has made it several years beyond that, now 100 years old. And notably, if he's able to make it into early next year, Jill, he will have spent 2 years in hospice care.
Which is pretty incredible, given that his grandson had warned that he was really kind of like on his last breaths a few times now already.
Yeah, family thought that he went into hospice, that he didn't have much time left. And then they were particularly concerned when Rosalind, his wife of 70 plus years, the former first lady, passed away last year, that, that would be it for him as well. And yet he has made it to his 100th birthday, and he's filed his mail-in ballot.
All right, switching gears to the battle over what is in our food. Protesters gathered outside of Kellogg's Battle Creek, Michigan headquarters on Tuesday to deliver a petition with over 400,000 signatures calling for the company to remove artificial dyes and preservatives from their cereals. And it comes after controversial online food activist Vani Hari, who is known as the Food Babe on social media, posted about how Fruit Loops ingredients are different in Canada versus the United States. The U.S. version has red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, which a 2012 study linked to being carcinogenic and causing allergic reactions. Kellogg, which makes Fruit Loops and Apple Jacks, announced nearly a decade ago that it would remove artificial colors and ingredients from its products by 2018. The company has done that in other countries where Fruit Loops are colored with concentrated carrot juice, blueberry, and watermelon juice. But in the U.S., the cereal still contains a chemical preservative called BHT and artificial colors. So here is a bit of Hari speaking at the rally on Tuesday.
I'm here for the mom, all the moms who struggle to feed their children healthy food without added chemicals. I'm here for the countless parents who have children with ADHD and are looking for answers. I'm here for all Americans who don't know the truth about our food industry.
A 2021 European Public Health Commission report found that the preservative BHT disrupted the endocrine system, but the FDA says it has reviewed and evaluated the effects of color additives on children's behavior and believes that most children have no adverse effects when consuming them. Mo News spoke with Dr. Jess Steyer, a public health scientist of Unbiased Science, to dig into whether these products are safe and what is behind the different policies.
Right, we've had Steyer on before over on the interview pod, talking about how to read scientific studies, etc. She has the podcast, the Unbiased Science podcast, which is a good listen. So she tries to break it down here and tries to get at the heart of the matter, when it comes to these protests. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, a lot of controversy around this. There's also a lot of controversy around Vani Hari, who leads the effort here, and her lack of scientific credentials. And yet there are some scientific studies, as you mentioned, Jill, that have backed up the idea that some of these artificial colors are having an impact. Part of this has to do with how Europe and other countries deal with these additives and how the U.S. deals with it. And that's a bit of what we spoke with Steyer here, including the studies themselves. Some of the studies are preclinical. Some of them only deal with animals and not humans. Nonetheless, there is an approach in Europe that is much more precautionary than the approach in the U.S. And we should also note that while it's stated that these dyes are banned in Europe, they're not actually banned. They get warning labels. Again, a distinction here. Nonetheless, here's a bit of the conversation that our producer Lauren had with Just Steyer as we've been researching the topic.
We have our own, cultural norms, our own preferences. We have access to different materials and ingredients, right? But then more than that, we also do take different approaches to assessing harm. So in the US, we take something called a risk-based approach, whereas in many other countries, they take a precautionary or a hazard-based approach. So in the US, we really consider our exposure, right? So, okay, there's something that might be harmful, but how much of it do we need to be exposed to and for how long for us to see harm, right? And in other countries, they tend to take a precautionary approach, hazard approach, where it's like, okay, this thing has the potential to harm us. It doesn't, matter so much how much of it we need to be exposed to. And some people prefer that.
So an interesting approach there, Jill. Here in America, it's all about at the FDA, et cetera, how much you're getting of something and how much evidence is there that people have been hurt. Whereas in Europe and in Canada, it's very much like this is something that we don't like. Regardless, just out of abundance of caution, we should ban it or put a warning label on it. Notably, when it comes to these chemicals, a number of them are allowed in the commercial food system, have been reviewed by the FDA, but some have not been reevaluated for decades. Like Red 40, for instance, was last evaluated back in the early 1970s. So there are calls here, again, for bans in some cases, like, can we study this more? And all of this comes in the wake of a new California law known as the California School Food Safety Act that bans 6 potentially harmful dyes in food served in public schools. That ban in California, it's interesting, they're taking a state approach to this as opposed to waiting for the federal government. That bans all of the dyes in Fruit Loops, as well as blue dye number 2 and green dye number 3. Some studies that California looked at did find potential links to hyperactivity and neurobehavioral problems in some children. And so that's where we are there. So you do see this huge movement here. Some of it is political. Some of it is backed by kind of RFK Jr. And that group. They're calling themselves MAHA now, Make America Healthy Again. A takeoff of MAGA, Make America Great Again. So there's a political element here that has made this particularly divisive. There's certainly a health element here. There is some preclinical studies. There is some studies. There is a lack of studies. There's a misinterpretation of studies. There's a lot going on here. One thing Steyer likes to say is that while there have been accusations that we have a loosey-goosey regulatory system here in the U.S., there are actually things that are banned in the U.S. that are allowed in Europe. There is some good information out there, and we're just trying to get to the bottom of it. But it's a hot debate here in terms of is our food healthy? Is the FDA taking a precautionary enough approach here? Should we be more like Europe in the U.S.? Some people say yes. And in some cases, again, you see some states not waiting for the feds to get involved here, but taking things into their own hands. So California has passed a couple laws around this.
Moshe, I will just say that as a parent and all of us parents and everybody, but really especially parents who are feeding kids and are responsible for what they eat, it is extremely frustrating. It is so confusing. I wish there was some more accurate information, that we weren't relying on kind of like social media people or these old studies. I wish there was some sort of just kind of like universal
or studies from the 1970s.
That it's not just individual states acting and then hoping that everyone else follows. And then every once in a while, you'll hear something on social media, for example, that an organic brand has found to have more microplastics than a regular brand. And I'm like, oh my God, I have been, feeding my kids Annie's mac and cheese, twice a week since birth. It's just, you don't know what to do at a certain point.
Yeah, and you hope to have a rational conversation about this, and obviously some of those studies and some of the pushback comes from industries with a lot of money and a lot of lobbyists. At the same time, there are health, consumer safety advocates from various organizations or individuals, as we've mentioned, that engage. We can say sometimes in fear mongering, where they say, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing," or "This sounds weird." And I think there's some good accounts on TikTok and Instagram that try to fact check that stuff. At the same time, it's not us taking the side of like the big industry saying everything that they're serving us is safe, but not everything they're serving us is killing us. And so, I share with you our hope for good information out there that is objectively studied on human beings. Some people were joking in the comments as I posted a couple clips here, and some people are joking, some people are fighting with each other, but the people who are joking are like, run an experiment with your kids where you give them these certain food dyes. And some people will attest to this. They say, when I give my kids snacks with some of these red 40 or whatever, I do notice a difference. And obviously, some kids might be different than other kids, but it's fascinating here. So, Jill, I don't know if you want to run an experiment on your children, but that's what some parents are doing or say they have done in the comments over on Instagram.
Well, our producer, Lauren, actually asked Dr. Steyer about that. That very thing that said that some parents say that they don't give their kids Skittles for a couple days and they can notice a difference. And she said in response that a lot of that is hard to really measure because you're kind of like, you see what you look for as a parent. So if you're expecting that they're going to maybe be a little bit chiller when they're not having the candy. Also, when do you eat candy? Maybe at a birthday party. Well, you're kind of like hyper and running around and crazy anyway. So it's kind of like apples and oranges. It's really hard to figure out.
You should really just be feeding your kid apples and oranges. I think exactly. I think you've gotten to it. Apples and oranges over Skittles.
Organic
is probably the right way to go. And there's like 72.3 million ingredients in Skittles. So God knows what in it is potentially creating that effect for their kids.
All right, time for the speed read. Let's start overseas. This from Reuters. North Korean state media said on Wednesday that around 1.4 million young people had applied to join or return to the army this week, blaming Seoul, South Korea for a provocative drone incursion that had brought, quote, the tense situation to the brink of war. The fiery rhetoric comes after North Korea last week accused Seoul of sending drones over Pyongyang that scattered a huge number of anti-North leaflets.
Jill, it's always interesting seeing those releases from North Korea, because ultimately you don't really have a choice in North Korea as to what you do. So like 1.4 million people have signed up for the military. I don't know that you have a choice in that country. Nonetheless, you have a lot of headlines coming out of Kim Jong-un in North Korea lately. And it comes, Jill, people might recall if they listened to our pod episode earlier this fall, I think late summer, where the CIA and top U.S. intelligence officials were getting word that when Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un recently got together, they discussed being up to stuff in October and the weeks leading up to the U.S. election, hoping to basically mess around here. So just be cautious here with these headlines from Kim Jong-un and from Russia here. They know that a U.S. election is happening. They know they can have impact on that. So it's going to be interesting here to watch what unfolds here. People have been asking about an October surprise. What will be the October surprise this election? And it might come out of Pyongyang, depending on what Kim Jong-un is up to. It comes, by the way, as the Ukrainians have said, they have evidence that North Korea is sending North Korean troops into Russia to fight against Ukraine right now as well.
I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but we do always talk about this October surprise. But given how many people do early voting, I feel like the October surprise, it kind of has to be like the September surprise. And this whole election season has just been so, quote unquote, unprecedented, as we always say.
June surprise. The June surprise was the May surprise was the Trump indictment. The June surprise was the debate. The July surprise was Biden dropping out. Guys, how many surprises, Kim Jong-un? What do you got? Speaking of which, by the way, before we leave North Korea
We've seen it all,
the North Koreans,
Kim Jong-un.
We've seen it all, Kim. What are you going to do, start a war? Actually, I don't want to give him ideas. And that's the concern there. But at the end of the day, most experts watching this don't think he's actually going to start a war. That said, this week, you might have seen the headline that he blew up all the roads and rail lines on his side of the border that lead to South Korea. He said the South is going to pay a dear price. He does not like what South Korea is up to. Kim Jong-un, by the way, we should note those roads and rail lines don't actually do anything. Nothing runs in between them. And he's known for blowing things up in his country as part of his own propaganda, saying, look, we showed them in the past recent years. He blew up empty buildings and other things that aren't used for anything. But it does come, Jill, after recently he did send those balloons full of garbage and poop over the border. So I guess maybe blowing up the rail line is preferred by the South Koreans as opposed to just descending baskets of poop and garbage that Kim Jong-un was sending across to make some sort of statement to the South Koreans.
Totally mature, Moshe.
He's like, I will not send you bags of garbage anymore, but I'm going to just blow up some empty stuff and say, I'm going to show you guys. Though, Jill, I will say, jokes aside, we got to take the guy seriously. The country has nuclear weapons. He's a little bit unstable. So a lot of people are watching what he's up to.
Staying in Asia, also from Reuters, the Chinese government says it will never give up its right to use of force to take over Taiwan. And it comes after another bout of war games and a visit by the Chinese President Xi Jinping to the scene of a famous defeat for Taiwanese forces. China, which views the democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory, staged a day of large-scale drills around the island on Monday that it said were a warning to, quote, separatist acts following last week's National Day speech by Taiwan's president.
Yeah, this is another situation we're watching out of Asia. What will China do in the coming months, coming years? Officially, Taiwan is, quote unquote, air quotes here, part of China. They've declared it. It was historically part of China. But then when the Chinese Communist Revolution happened, the democratic government that was there escaped to Taiwan and have effectively done their own thing there. They have not been controlled by the Chinese for the better part of 7 decades. The world, including the U.S., has a one China policy, does not consider Taiwan independent, but it effectively operates independently. Here, has unofficial relations with the U.S., gets arms from the U.S. But the big question is if, and in some cases when, will China actually invade Taiwan to officially make it controlled by China again? Taiwan's government here officially rejects Chinese sovereignty claims. Chinese military has been ratcheting up these provocations, these drills over time. China would prefer to take over Taiwan in a bloodless way, but ultimately here Taiwan has said, we're not going to just turn over and let you control us. So that'll be one of the big stories we're watching. I guess we can say, as we talk about October surprises in the coming weeks here, but the feeling among intelligence officials here in the West is that China wouldn't make a move, at least not for a couple more years here.
All right, switching gears, let's talk about the economy from CNN Business. For consumers still scarred by jumps in their energy bills in recent years, the International Energy Agency has some good news. Oil and natural gas prices will probably be lower over the next 5 years. Energy prices soared in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, which followed a rise in global demand as economies reopened after COVID lockdowns put lives on hold.
So some good news there. According to the International Energy Administration, oil and natural gas supplies will increase in the second half of this decade, as long as, and these are big ifs, the conflict in the Middle East and Russia's war in Ukraine don't derail current trends. So contingent on not complete instability, beyond the instability that we've already seen. They put out this wide-ranging report. They also said that investing in clean energy isn't just necessary to prevent a climate catastrophe. It also makes financial sense because it removes inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. This is something that the folks in Texas have discovered. There are days in Texas where the entire state operates off of clean energy, solar and the like. And then when they need more, they end up falling back on natural gas and oil. And the folks down there in Texas will say it makes economic sense. It's cheaper at this point. So we'll see what happens there. And it comes as here in the U.S., Jill, we continue to break new records when it comes to oil production. Right now, for the past couple of years, the U.S. has now been producing more oil than any country in the history of humanity. And that trend continues to look like it will keep going up regardless of who wins next month.
And regardless of who wants to admit it. As we always talk about, the Democrats don't want to take, they don't want to take responsibility for it, even though Americans might like it. Trump won't admit it because he wants to say that he's going to be the one who increases energy production.
Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, so
right.
everyone's like denying this fact.
Right. Like on Biden's watch, we produce more oil than ever, but environmentalists don't want to hear it. So Biden and Harris don't really talk about it. And Trump doesn't want to say that Democrats have produced more oil than anything in history because he's like, I'll produce even more.
But you know where you will hear the truth? The Mo News podcast.
The Mo News podcast, and on the media literacy tour that we're doing on campuses, junior high, high school, and college near you.
All right, from CNBC, Americans often splurge on gifts during the holidays, and this year it is expected to increase a bit. This year, holiday spending from November 1st through December 31st is expected to increase to a record total of $989 billion, according to the National Retail Federation. That's about $10 billion more than last year. Deloitte's holiday survey found that shoppers expect to spend on average $1,778. It's so funny to me how exact it is, up about 8% compared to last year.
So inflation's only up about 3%. So the question is, how much is inflation factored in there into more spending? Or how much is it, Jill, that Mike is going to just get you a nicer gift this winter?
I feel like we don't even exchange gifts around the holidays. Like, I'm not even included in this because I don't really do holiday shopping.
Your household isn't spending an average of $1,778 on your holiday gifts?
No, I probably spend that on food each week.
Yeah. Well, that's your holiday gift.
Yes.
You're like, you will get milk, eggs, and cheese, and with my $1,778. It turns out, by the way, speaking of which, Jill, is some people spend that much and even more, since that's an average. 28% of holiday shoppers still haven't paid off the gifts they purchased for their loved ones last year, according to a report from NerdWallet. Heading into the peak holiday shopping season, 74%, 3 out of 4 Americans plan to use their credit card to make purchases. Another quarter, about 1 in 4 Americans, will dip into savings to buy holiday gifts. And 16%, 1 in 6 Americans, will lean into buy now, pay later services in order to be able to get all the gifts that they want.
And from Fox Business, after well over a year of discussion, Tom Brady is officially a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost immediately upon retiring for good in February of 2023, the 7-time Super Bowl winner put his hat in the ownership ring. This does end any chance at a second comeback for Brady, as owners are not able to play. He had been adamant that he was done playing in the past, but now it is official. His involvement in sports franchises in the Las Vegas area was already underway after he purchased a stake in the Las Vegas Aces. That is a WNBA team, and they were the champions, actually, in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, and much of these famous athletes have discovered they can make even more money as owners. We talked about how Michael Jordan has made more money off of his sale of the Charlotte franchise there than he ever made playing basketball. So Brady, among these former athletes that's getting into the ownership game here, there was that rumor that he might come back again to the Miami Dolphins earlier this year. But ultimately, Brady is done for good here. He's in the announcing booth. He is owning, and that's where you can find him, it looks like, at this point. Jill, I mean, coming back again? Come on. That'd be nuts.
It was kind of nuts the first time.
Yeah. Well, and obviously had it appears some personal life ramifications for him as well. All right, we end here with On This Day in History on this October 17th. We begin in 1931. Gangster Al Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison on this day in 1931 and was fined $80,000, the downfall of one of the most notorious criminals of the 1920s and 30s. He was on top of the FBI's most wanted list, wanted for a variety of crimes, but they were able to finally convict him on tax evasion. He ended up getting out of jail after 8 years, went home to Palm Island, Florida, and then died at the age of 46. On this day in 1956, one of the most famous chess matches in history, Bobby Fischer wins the game of the century. He was 13 years old at the time, takes on the 26-year-old Donald Byrne. Takes place in New York City. Fischer would win the U.S. championship the following year at the age of 14, become a Grand Master at the age of 15, and then become the world champion. Remarkable A remarkable player there, that Bobby Fischer. On this day in 1989, if you were in the Bay Area, you might remember the major earthquake there, the 6.9 earthquake that rocked Northern California during Game 3 of the World Series between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's. It forced the postponement of the matchup. The series would resume 10 days after the quake. The quake itself killed 67 people, injured 3,700, caused $5 billion in damage back then in 89. The big fear, of course, in California with the uptick in some of these minor quakes is that another potential big one is on the way. All right, Jill, the answer to your clue here, turning 52 years old today. Some might call him Slim Shady. Some call him Eminem. Some call him Marshall Mathers.
And he is a grandfather? Was that your clue?
Jill, Haley Jade, his daughter, could give birth any day now. It might actually have happened. I haven't checked social media late on Wednesday, and she hadn't announced it yet. But Eminem is on the verge of being a grandpa. They did a gender reveal earlier this month, and that hit me in a way that I haven't been hit as a millennial before.
In a profound and real
Eminem
way.
witnessed his daughter's gender reveal on the verge of becoming Grandpa Eminem.
And he is still putting out music, by the way. He has that new song, Houdini. I happen to really like it.
A young, hip grandpa, right? Eminem's your grandpa and he's 52? Pretty remarkable. Jill, I can't end this podcast without mentioning Billy Joel. On this date in 1989, released the album Stormfront, which included We Didn't Start the Fire. It's been burning for 35 years since it came. I mean, really remarkable, Jill. 35 years old, that song. A song about the previous 4 decades, now itself 35 years old.
And Fall Out Boy did the remake of it with more up-to-date lyrics. I still like the Billy Joel version.
Oh, Billy Joel takes us through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Fall Out Boy then takes us through the 90s, 2000s, teens. And now, I mean, in January, we're going to hit 2025. So we're halfway through this decade. So I don't know, Jill, I'll have to say that even the past 4 years deserve their own song.
The problem with the Fall Out Boys song, if you look at the lyrics, is that they're just not chronological. It's just like everything's all over the place. So I find it a little hard to follow.
Yeah, I hear you on that. They got Sandy Hook, Columbine, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, ISIS, LeBron James. It's a lot.
It's too much. It's like
when you have a line that says like ISIS, LeBron James, what are we doing here? Michael Keaton, Batman, Bush v. Gore. I can't take it anymore. Listen, I think it was a good effort. I'm looking at this. Elon Musk, Kaepernick, Texas failed electric grid.
SpongeBob, Golden State Killer got
It just, I don't know. Maybe we're just nostalgic for the first one. It's tough, but credit to them for trying.
Moshe will have to come up with our own. I think that'll be our maybe our resolution by the end of the year.
We could just run these podcasts through ChatGPT and just.
That is a good idea. All right,
grocery store prices. I can't take it anymore.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast and humoring us as we go on this tangent. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
The reviews matter. Thanks for leaving them. Have a good Friday Eve, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.